What's going on, everyone? Now, first of all, before we get into this, just like Bruce Willis said about Die Hard, this is not a Christmas episode. Now, Bruce Willis was entirely wrong. Die Hard is my favorite Christmas movie, second favorite Christmas movie, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, then Die Hard. But no, this is not a Christmas special, but I am filming it in December. With that out of the way, let's get to today's build.
The Christmas tree's on fire, Santa's holding the lighter, my parents are both liars.
If you watched the last video I put out, which was the unboxing for this, then you know that this case is the Vetroo K1 Pangolin. For fun, because I've never built with this brand before, I decided to go with the cooler and the fans, also Vetroo. But let's get into the rest of the parts in no specific order. For our motherboard, we're going with the ASUS Prime Z590p Wi-Fi motherboard. This motherboard has an LGA 1200 socket and has a black, silver, and gray motif that I think is going to work really well in this case. Our CPU is the Intel Core i7-11700K. For our RAM, we're going with 32 gigs at 3200 megahertz CL16. We went with the T-Force DarkZ on this for two reasons. One, the price was good, but more importantly, the gray aesthetic to this is almost identical to the case. So it's gonna look awesome. And if you couldn't tell, we have two kits of it. So we'll fill up all those DIMM slots nicely. Now for our hard drive, we're going with a 2 terabyte M.2 NVMe, so on and so forth, from Inland. Now, I'm a huge advocate of large storage for a gaming library, and I often use full-size hard drives, but we're trying to cut down on all the cord clutter as we do this build. So no separate boot drive, 2 terabyte all the way. Next, for our graphic card, which is the only used piece in this. Everything else is brand new. We're going with an MSI RTX 2080 Super. This is a good card. I actually just took this out of my wife's system. She still runs a 2080 Super, but I gave her something a little more gaudy. Lots of lights and flare. This one I liked for the build because I wasn't sure about the space because I've never built inside this case, and this is a 2-fan model. And also the black, gray, and silver that goes along with this card, again, is gonna match the motherboard and case beautifully. Next, from Vetroo, we have a 360mm radiator with fans. This is the Lurker V360. I've never used it before. It is RGB, and I think this 3-pin, so like the 5-volt, connects directly to our motherboard. And I'm gonna try to fit all of these in here, but I got 2 sets of 3 each, so 6 total of Vetroo fans. There is, I feel like, cable management in the back is gonna be a mess, because these don't daisy chain, and if I'm remembering correctly, they do come with a hub and a remote if need be, but these should also connect to the motherboard, so we should be able to do everything through software. The remote will be a backup in a pinch if we need it. This motherboard does have 2 3-pin 5-volt connectors and 2 4-pin 12-volt connectors for RGB, so we shouldn't have to do any splitters or extra connections. It should all work as is. Oh, and last but not least, can't believe I forgot this, the EVGA 850 GT Supernova. This is an 850 watt power supply, 80 plus gold rated, and it is fully modular. So again, no extra cables. That is hefty. Actually, that is a hefty power supply. The case just weighs a little more. I clearly have my work cut out for me. So there's no other thing left to do than to just get into it. Roll that montage. everyone, welcome back, and I say that because this is not the same day. Aesthetically, I think this PC turned out amazing. Practically, on the other hand, this took me over a day to get this build in. Now mind you, like I said before, I've never built in this case, but I've built a couple PCs before, so I'm fairly familiar with the process. And this, ooh, this was, So again, let me emphasize, finished product, awesome. But let's talk about the process for a second. So getting the motherboard in and anything that attaches to the motherboard, not that hard. There's room to work and plenty of space to run cables, even if you have, big hands. The catch is everything else around it. We're talking fans, cooler, power supply. Every single one of those, with the exception of this exhaust fan here, has its own separate plate that you have to unscrew, attach the fan, and then re-screw. So this fan on the top here has its own plate. These two fans are attached to another plate, and then this cooler, subsequently its fans, are attached to another plate. The power supply I did put in before I put the cooler in, but the power supply also has, you guessed it, a detachable plate. So if you're doing the math on the amount of screws this has, 9 fans, 4 screws each, cooler mount has another 4 screws, each one of those plates has another 4 screws. Short answer is, I was screwed. Another thing I wanted to mention is this front plate that attaches to the fans, which attach to the radiator. That could be machined a little more precise. And I say that for a couple reasons. The plate itself fits in the case, no problem. I had no issues screwing in the plate to the case. But once I had the plate attached to the fans, attached to the radiator, and tried to insert that, there was enough space, enough give, enough, I guess you could say, adjustment area, so that the radiator hit the bottom of the case before the plate had actually seated into where the screw holes are. That should be machined more precisely, so someone like me doesn't have to take that out. And just as a reminder, the brand Vetroo that this case is, the same brand that makes that cooler. So theoretically, it should fit first shot in my opinion. I shouldn't have to take it back out, adjust the screws, pull it up a little bit so that the radiator sits higher on the plate, so when the plate drops in, the radiator has clearance on the base. This did make a couple of the screw holes slightly askew, so instead of having all 12 fan screws in, it's more like 10. I did have to take a couple out because the holes at that point weren't lining up. But everything is so snug, nothing is moving, nothing's rattling, that part's fine. If you are considering a push-pull configuration on your radiator, I did put a couple extra fans on the back side here. I did not put a third fan because it wouldn't fit with the power supply, and this, it's an 850 watt power supply. It's not a long power supply. It's not taking up any extra space. That's just the configuration of the case. And also I had bought 2 more packs of 3 for those fans. So we have 4 coming across from the base to the top, 2 more right there. So not only did I not have the fan for another one down there, just wasn't available. So actually that worked out fine. The case is strong but slightly malleable. So getting the glass plates up, I did have to do a little bending and a little tweaking, so be prepared for that. Lastly, the cable management on the back is atrocious and practically non-existent. Not only are there a plethora of cables coming through the back, there's no eyelets or straps or anything in the back to anchor or move them in a certain direction. It's just a massive free-for-all back there. So each one of those fans has 2 cables coming off of it, and that's not counting the SATA cables, the 2 hubs that I have back there, your regular power cables. There's just so much going on behind this back plate. I think they should put some eyelets in or something that we can put our zip ties on, or, and being a lazy cable management guy, I like this even more, don't give me a glass panel for the back. Give me a steel panel so that no one can see it. I would like that even more. The last thing that I want to say, and this is about the brand itself, is that the fan lighting should be integrated. And by that what I mean is, for the cooler comes with 3 fans. Those 3 fans and the pump are all RGB. And they have a 3-pin connector that connects directly to the motherboard, so your motherboard software controls those fans. Those fans run through a hub. If you press the button, it changes the lights. If you hold the button, it integrates it with the motherboard. Easy enough. The fans come with their own header for RGB and for power. It connects to SATA, of course. In addition, those fans also come with a 3-pin 5-volt motherboard header. But somehow that's just to power the RGB lights. It doesn't actually control them. You have to control those with a remote. Now mind you, I have built plenty of older gen systems And to get some flair in there, I've added lights with a remote. I have no problem with that. But when you're building a computer of this spec or higher, I don't think you should be required to use a remote. When some of your products can attach to the motherboard and others can't to control RGB, I think that falls short. Now, the workaround that I did with this is the 4-pin header that controls the 3 fans and the pump RGB. I unplugged the pump and I daisy-chained the RGB across the 4 other fans into that other hub and then connected the RGB for the pump at the end of that. So there's this 5-piece daisy chain running to that header so I can control all the RGB through here. It's an ASUS motherboard, so we're doing Armory Crate and their setup. So that other fan header that's running power and speed with the SATA power, all the RGB, all the fans are unplugged from that. So Vetroo, since you have the technology to run your pumps, fans, and RGB through, why not put that tech in the header for your other fans? People who need to use remote can, and people with the 5-volt option can plug right in and make their life easier. But that's just a recommendation from a YouTuber with 700 subscribers. But that's me, that's me being done. I'm done being nitpicky. Those are the problems I experienced, and I think that those are problems that the average user would experience too. Enough chit chat, let's pull it in for a closer look. The lights are all set to white just to help illuminate it, but with the software, you can set them to any color, any style. The motherboard sits at almost a 45-degree angle, and it's not that bad, and it kind of fits with the whole flow of the case. Now I went with a 2-slot, 2-fan RTX 2080 Super, and since I am doing the push-pull configuration with the fans here, there's not a lot of space in between, so this actually worked out well. If you didn't have these fans here, or if you went air-cooled, you shouldn't have a problem fitting a 3-fan card in here. Even if it's one of those beefy boys that NVIDIA is putting out right now, you would still have enough clearance between your power supply and your graphic card. Here's the back of the computer. Nothing really to write home about. These fins, they all exhaust out the top. So our fan configuration is obviously all of our intake is through the radiator here. 1, 2, 3, 4 fans and exhaust. But again, with an open case, that doesn't matter as much, but it does keep the air flowing. Our power supply is fully modular, which is good because there is no extra space for extra cables. We have everything running down and out the back here. Coming across the front, you can see our front I/O, our fans here. The layout is a little different. This fan's fairly centered, this fan's fairly centered. This one, you can start to see this gap right here. I don't love that, but it's not a deal breaker for me. As we circle around the back, sorry, the glare's a little bad, but that glass is the only thing holding everything in. I don't know how well you can see, the cables, but it is a lot of fun. So there are some slats that run along the case here. As I dropped the radiator in vertically across the top to get past the power supply, I had to feed these through simultaneously. 5 fans, 2 cables each, pulling those through. And here's one hub. There's another hub buried over here. Yeah, not the most glamorous part of this build. Oh, and lastly, I did want to mention that the thermals in this were fantastic. Obviously, there's nothing choking off air. Let me see, I think I have a photo of it. I'll throw it up on screen if I can find it, but let me just double check. So on any new or used PC that I build, I always run Furmark and Cinebench R23. I run it for 20-30 minutes, just see how everything works out. So the GPU temperature under full load for over 20 minutes plateaued and stayed at 74 degrees Celsius straight through. Our CPU temp under full load under Cinebench R23 did even better at 66 degrees Celsius. And again, a couple dips here and there, maybe a degree, not even 2, stable right through. So performance and thermals on those, spot on. But that's it for this build. It was one of those builds that was challenging, but in the end, rewarding. If you like this and you're curious about some of the other stuff that I put out, definitely like and subscribe at my YouTube channel. I'd also encourage you to check out what I'm putting out on Instagram, as well as a couple funny shorts on TikTok too. So thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.